Welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast. This is the show that focuses on climbing the mountain of fatherhood together. Our mission is to help fathers be present by sharing valuable ideas and concepts that will equip men to be the best father possible. Being a good father is hard work, but it is so vitally important. We believe that dads matter, and that's why this podcast is for you. So gear up, dads, and get ready. It's time to start climbing.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very, very special episode of the Present Fathers Podcast. We are joined tonight by Dr. Bill Harley. He is a giant in the world of saving marriages, and so we are just super thrilled to have him on tonight. So, Dr. Harley, over to you. We'd love to hear just kind of how you got started, what led you to writing the book His Needs, Her Needs, and then all the subsequent books that you've written, and all the work you've done with marriage builders and what you've done really your entire career. So, over to you, sir.
Oh, well, I'm delighted to be with you. You have a very important mission that I fully support. I started out in math and computer science, and this was at a time that computers really hadn't been around that long. And I did some work in artificial intelligence, and that got people's attention. And I was offered a fast track through a PhD program in psychology. Up to that point, I thought that psychologists were not really scientific. I wouldn't call them scientists. I would call them people that had wishful thinking and meant well, but that was about it. And the idea that I would become a psychologist was something I hadn't anticipated, even though my father was one. And I was going to go into the field of physics and computer science. So I get my PhD in psychology in a very short period of time. I didn't ever have a psychology class in college. So I got in because of my interest in artificial intelligence. So my background is really science and math. And so I started out as a psychologist. I started teaching psychology. And people kept coming to me with their marital problems. And I was thinking, I'll give it a shot. My dad was a marriage counselor. I didn't think he'd ever did anybody much good. But, people like to talk to somebody. So marriage counseling probably has its place. So they would come to me with problems, and I couldn't ever help them. And of course, my feeling was that marriage counseling really didn't work anyway. I didn't think that I could add anything to what is already being done. To me, it was kind of a mystery. So at the age of, what was I? Probably 30. And it's kind of interesting to be a counselor to somebody who's 30 years older than you are. Hard to create credibility. But I decided at the age of 30 that I was going to be a marriage counselor. And because I felt people were needing it. And I was teaching at the time. And so people would come into my office, and I did some marriage counseling. And I really wasn't any good at it. I couldn't help anybody. And so I decided to do an internship. And I went to one of the most highly respected clinics in the nation, which happened to be in Minneapolis. And I took 2 years of internship there. And I got to know everybody. They claimed to have a 90% success rate. And I got to where I saw everybody's notes, and I knew what the clients were. I knew how it turned out, and nobody's getting helped. I would follow up. They would be discharged, and I would call them up. I'd say, "How are you doing?" "Well, we're about to get divorced." Well, they were discharged, but nobody followed up. Nobody knew what they were up to. The director of the clinic was divorced shortly after I left. And one of the people who supervised me got divorced. So I figured that I had to figure this thing out. And of course, knowing that I'm kind of a curious person by nature, that there ought to be a solution to this. I mean, finding a solution to marital problems can't be that difficult. And so I got to work and looked at, okay, what do you think it might be? What do you think might save marriages? Nobody seems to know. There was a 1965 study done on the effectiveness of various forms of therapy. And marriage therapy got the lowest ratings of every form of therapy that there was. And that study was replicated in 1985, and the same result came.
Wow.
That only 25% felt that it had done them any good whatsoever, and many of them felt that it had been more harm than good. So I said, okay, I don't want to do more harm than good, that's for sure, but I want to figure this thing out. And with my background in behavioral psychology, I thought, maybe there is something to the idea of romantic love that I need to pay attention to, because the people that would be coming in to see me about their marriage problems, who were mostly committed Christians, by the way, would tell me that they were going to get divorced. And I'd say, what about your commitment? Haven't you decided that you're going to stay married because of your relationship to God? It's God's will. Yeah, but they just didn't feel that the marriage was going anywhere. And then they weren't in love with each other. We're not in love. I said, well, that's not a reason to get divorced, just because you're not in love. Now, of course, Joyce and I were in love. We were in love. I couldn't imagine being with her without being in love. So, I thought to myself, maybe that's something I ought to look into. And so I started studying romantic love as an academic pursuit. And there were very few people that were actually studying romantic love and what it took to be in love. I actually started doing research with the students that I had. And of course, if you're at a college, people are falling in and out of love all the time.
Right.
And so you've got a kind of a petri dish of being in love, so that you can really look at this thing and discover, okay, what is it? What is it? And I knew that I was in love, but I didn't know why I was in love. And I knew Joyce was in love with me. We could not have, if somebody had asked us, what accounts for the reason that you're in love? I would have come up with some ridiculous thing, but it wouldn't have been the answer. And so I decided that I would use my behavioral background to come up with a theory that romantic love is nothing more than the association of somebody with intense feelings of pleasure. So the idea is that I look Pavlov's dog as my example. You shine a blue light with food, and the dog salivates. And you shine the blue light all by itself after a few combinations of that, and the dog will salivate. Okay? So, all right, so maybe romantic love is nothing more than just associating a spouse with good feelings. So I said, I'm gonna run with that theory. And so I decided to actually do some research on what would make people feel good in marriage. And I had a few ideas, but I didn't want to bias the study. So I just asked people, what could your spouse do that would make you happy? And they would give me reasons, and basically write things down. And so after talking to I don't know, probably 50, 60, maybe it could have 100 people. I came up with a number of ideas. And so what I did then was I asked my students to classify the ideas into categories. Give me categories. So here's what they're telling me. Give me a category that fits. And the students and I came together with 10 categories. So 10 categories that all represented what a spouse could do that would make them feel good. And it was affection, intimate conversation, sexual fulfillment, recreational companionship, honesty and openness, domestic support, family commitment, admiration. And this is the list of 10 things that I thought, these are things that make people feel good. So, so then I had a list for people to choose from. And if you're doing a survey, asking people to come up with something out of the blue is really tough. It's better to have them check things off a list.
Right.
See? So I gave them a list. I gave them the list of 10 things. And then I had extra at the bottom. They could answer, they could add a few other things if they wanted. What could your spouse do that would make you the happiest? And I used that list for my counseling. I just said, whatever it is your spouse says that would make you the happiest, do it. And
I love how simple
happy.
It is.
Yeah, and the husband has to do the things that are on the wife's list, and the wife has to do the things that are on the husband's list. And man, I was extremely successful. Now, I lived at a time in our society where you could tell a woman to have sex with her husband and she would do it. We don't live that way anymore. You can't achieve that objective. But I would tell a husband, what she wants is conversation. Give her 3 hours of conversation and she'll make love to you. And sure enough, he comes up with 3 hours of conversation. She has sex with him. They both come in telling me, he tells me it's a lot of work just to have sex. She says, I don't think it's right for a man to tell a woman to have sex. Nowadays, I cannot accomplish that objective. If a couple comes into me, I can't get her to have sex with them. And sometimes I can't get the husband to talk to her for 3 hours. But in the beginning, it was pretty simple.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed, though, about the list, and I had a lot of people fill it out, maybe when I got to 200 couples, I noticed that men were checking off one thing and women were checking off something else. And so on average, men would come up with 5 of the emotional needs that were listed, and women would come up with the other 5. And since I would focus on mostly 1 and 2, with a kind of attention to the other 3, but not all 5, I ended up with 5 things for the average man, 5 things for the average woman. In 1986, by this time I had quit teaching. I went into clinical psychology full time. I had 32 clinics. 200 people were working with me. And I was on a roll when it came to marital therapy. Place was packed. I had people coming from all over the United States. And I taught a Sunday school class on marriage. And in the class, I went through the 10 emotional needs. And I said, these are the needs of the average man. These are the needs of the average woman. And somebody did record the actual Sunday school class. And over time, somebody else transcribed it. And then somebody that I was counseling saw the transcription, took it to his boss at Revell, and the rest is history. They published the book. The transcription,
and that book is
the transcription of my Sunday school. Yeah, transcription of my Sunday school class.
So this one right here, right?
Right. Now, the book, of course, has sold, I don't know, on there it says 2 million copies. Actually, I've been paid for 5 million copies.
Wow.
It comes in 24 languages. That's the hardcover version of it. It comes in paperback. It comes, as you know, in audiobooks. Ebooks are out there. So it comes in a whole variety of ways, but it is without a doubt a barn burner.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea that this would happen. I just thought, man, I'm on to something. And I had really not written anything prior to this. And it took off not because I'm such a great writer, but because the ideas are really good.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, people have used this book to make a point that is extremely important. And that is, whatever it is your spouse needs, for crying out loud, get to be good at meeting.
Right. Yeah.
Learn how to be a good husband or wife by understanding your spouse and learning how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I branched out into more of a fuller way of looking at marriage. I thought, okay, there's more to marriage than just making your spouse happy. Turns out another big part of it is avoiding making your spouse unhappy. And people are really good at making each other unhappy. And so I got to work at figuring out, I did essentially the same thing, what does your spouse do to make you unhappy? And I came up with 6 categories that I call love busters. And they are demands, disrespect, anger, dishonesty, annoying habits, and independent behavior. And again, that pretty well covers the waterfront. And so I came up with the book Love Busters. So that was the next book I did. And then I'm also very much aware that problem solving is a big deal. And again, if you want to think about making love bank deposits and avoiding withdrawals, which was the concept that I used in His Needs, Her Needs. I said, think of each other as having a love bank, that when you meet each other's emotional needs, you're making love bank deposits. When you're hurting each other, you're making withdrawals. If you get enough deposits by making each other really happy, you're going to breach the romantic love threshold. You're going to be in love with each other. But if you hurt each other and annoy each other and just make yourselves a nuisance, you could, in fact, get to where you dislike each other, fall below 0. And if you got too deep and in the negative range, you might actually come to hate each other, which is something I experienced a lot in my counseling, where people would come to me hating each other. They never hated anybody before. And as Christians, we're not supposed to hate anybody. And so they find themselves, here I am married to somebody I hate. What am I going to do? Well, they had managed to associate their spouse with their worst experiences, and enough love units were withdrawn. So now they were deeply in the red. So all that kind of comes together. And I think, all right, there's one more area that I haven't talked about, and that is problem solving. So you've got to solve your problems in a way that makes love bank deposits and avoids withdrawals. And so I came up with the idea of the policy of joint agreement. Never do anything without an enthusiastic agreement between you and your spouse. And what that does is make sure that your lifestyle is something that you both enjoy, and that you're not making choices about your life that hurt each other. So don't do anything unless you're both on board, unless you both agree. And so that's kind of the third part that comes together to make marriages great. I might make one more point, and that is that I have a theory of marriage where I say that marriage is a relationship of extraordinary care. And if you are providing extraordinary care for each other, you will be in love. And so being in love is a litmus test of whether you're achieving extraordinary care for each other. And the 3 things you have to remember is meet each other's important emotional needs, avoid love busters, and make your decisions in a way that both of you can agree on the outcome. And, you can look at that and say, oh, that's pretty simple. I think I can do that. And for many people, it is. For many people, oh, wow, Dr. Harley, I hadn't thought about that before. And off they go, and they're happy
Right.
ever after. And then others that I have to work with for maybe a year or two, takes them that long before they can get into the hang of things. But I've got a lot of disciples that agree with me, but find it hard to actually implement what I'm trying to get them to do. So I'm still, at my age of 81, I'm still working with couples every day of the week that are struggling with this. Some people, they can just read the book and off they go, and they're happily ever after. And others, you got to work with them a little bit to make sure it happens. That's the long and the short of it.
It's impressive that at 81 you're still fighting the good fight.
Yep.
And for everyone who's aware, Dr. Harley has what's called Marriage Builders. This is what the landing page of his website looks like. I believe it's just marriagebuilders.com.
Yep.
And if you spend even just a few minutes looking through the resources on that website, there are a ton of free resources that cover a lot of these topics that he just walked over. So definitely check that out, and you won't go wrong.
I might mention that at the top right-hand corner, you push the button and you'll hear Joyce and I doing our radio show every day. And we have a radio show that is broadcast on some radio stations, but it's also a podcast. So you hear it from the beginning. And we also have an app so that you can bring it up on your cell phone. So we enjoy doing that. We've been doing this together for almost 20 years now.
That's awesome. Well, we're just starting here on the Present Fathers podcast, but maybe we'll be doing this for 20 plus years. So
it is fun, I'll tell you.
It is a lot of fun. Yeah. So if I can, just thanks again for joining and giving us your background. Brandon, I think you wanted to talk maybe a little bit about healthy boundaries, not just in your relationship, but also as a parent, right?
Yeah. So I feel like setting a standard to which your wife and you can live is an important thing. And I know you touch on it in the book. And I just wanted to ask, what are some healthy boundaries that viewers or listeners can utilize to make their marriage healthier in the boundaries department?
Yeah, basically, ideally, you shouldn't have to have boundaries, in the sense that if you are thoughtful, you follow the policy of joint agreement. You're not going to make choices that the other person doesn't agree with. You're going to go to a great deal of trouble to learn to become the person who meets your spouse's emotional needs, and you're going to avoid love busters. You don't need boundaries. Basically, those rules pretty much take care of the problem. I wrote an article in New Man magazine, which was very popular. I don't know if you guys have ever come across it before. I don't think it's in print anymore, but it's for Christian men, on why women leave men. And in that book, I talked about a problem that men often have, and that is that they make choices without including their spouse's interests in those choices. And the purpose of the book was to encourage them to follow what I call the policy of joint agreement. Don't do things unless you can both agree. And I use the example of a house where a man has various rooms in his house, represents the roles he plays. And he tends not to invite his wife into all of the rooms. There can be a room for the family where he invites his wife, and the room for lovemaking where he certainly does invite his wife. But then he has his recreational activities that the door is locked. He has hobbies that the door is locked. He might have friends that the door is locked. And the wife comes to the door and finds it locked, and she's horribly offended that there are these areas of his life that he's not including his wife. Mm-hmm. And the research that I've done on divorce is that the number one cause of divorce is neglect. And it's a point that I made in that article that women tend to be the ones to divorce men, not the other way around. So if you're going to get a divorce, chances are your wife is going to be the one to file for it. And the reason she's going to file for it, chances are, is because you're neglecting her. You're not making her a part of your life. You're not a partner with her. Now, that concept has an awful lot to do with fatherhood, which is your main topic. And my attitude about fatherhood is that raising children is a joint effort between you and your wife, that basically, if you want to be a great father, two things. Number one is you got to be in love with your wife, and your wife has to be in love with you. That's point number one. You're in love with each other. Point number two, you make all of your child rearing decisions together. You come to your children as a united front, and neither one of you is trying to get something for the children or get the children that isn't something that the other spouse is backing you up on and enthusiastic about it. Now, you ask the business of boundaries. And you can see that with my approach to things, what boundaries would there be? I mean, what you're doing is you are in a partnership. And I think of my partnership with my wife as being similar to my partnership with the Lord. I make my decisions with him in mind. He leads me. Now, I could say Joyce leads me. I lead her, she leads me. We're both in this thing together. And in growing up, our children knew that whatever either one of us wanted them to do was something we both wanted them to do. Let me just say a couple things just on the topic of fatherhood. Number one, never, ever lose your temper with your children or anyone else for that matter. One of the things that I put a great deal of emphasis in is the love buster angry outbursts. It's one of the 6. And as far as I'm concerned, angry outbursts is horrible. And not only as a parent are you going to find yourself far less effective in raising your children, but it is also going to tend to ruin your marriage. And so one of the things fathers need to learn how to do is to never lose your temper with your children or your wife or anyone else. I put a great deal of emphasis on that. Number 2, never discipline your children in any way, shape, or form without your spouse's enthusiastic agreement. Now, that comes with rewards as well. I'm dealing with a couple right now where the father is giving the children anything they want. And it's driving the mother crazy because, first of all, she's feeling that they're getting things without having earned it, and it's making her look bad because she's always saying, oh, we shouldn't be doing that, and the kids get the impression my father is a giver of all good things and my mother is a horrible person because she isn't giving us anything. Yeah. So make sure your gifts and your discipline is with each other. The third point is make sure you are consistent. Don't tell your kids to do one thing when you're in a good mood and something else when you're in a bad mood. Mm-hmm. And I think working together as a husband and wife, you're going to find yourselves more consistent because you're going to draw each other back. Yeah. So anyway, those are kind of the guidelines that I like to give. I like to give men. I think men are faced with an enormous responsibility right now that they never had to face 100 years ago. When I was counseling back in the 70s, America was going through a major crisis when it came to marriage. traditional marriage was becoming a thing of the past. I predicted in 1985 in an article I wrote that by the year 2040, marriages wouldn't exist anymore.
Wow.
This year, we have more single adults than we have married adults in America. Marriage is on its way out. Traditional marriage, where a husband and wife commit to each other, they raise their kids together, they love each other, and form a family bond. That is becoming a thing of the past.
Wow.
And it's tragic, and I don't know how to stop it. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. All I know is that our culture has been moving in that direction since I first started counseling, and it has continued to move in that direction even to this day. And so what you guys are doing to teach fathers to be good fathers, also helping to keep men good fathers and good husbands, because the stress right now on men, I think, is enormous. I think the responsibilities of men are much greater than they ever were. I would say I'd say that women are harder to please nowadays than they used to be. You know, when it comes to meeting emotional needs, women will always tell me, 5, I want 6. Or I want 7. You know, 5 isn't good enough, you know. And for men to do a good job as a husband, and to go do a good job as a father, and to have a career, and to be strong in the church, and be happy, you know, it takes a lot of thought.
Yeah.
You know, it's how to do all of this. So for you guys to set an example for other men, I think is great. And I, for one, am saying that, you know, I lived in an era where my wife, who was very qualified as a career person, she is a vocalist. She has done concerts. She has done radio in past, but she was a stay-at-home mom. We don't have very many stay-at-home moms anymore.
Yeah.
And it makes life a lot more complicated when you have 2 careers. And I'm not, and both of my children, the wives are professionals. My son's wife is a professional person. My daughter is a professional. She's a PhD in psychology. They were both stay-at-home moms. And it makes life a lot simpler. But I will say this, that if you are married to a career person, more power to you. I encourage it. I love it. I think women having careers is great, but it makes life a lot more complicated when you're married. So there you have it.
It's another logistical thing to figure out.
Exactly.
You were talking about how marriage is on the decline. I'm curious because I know you counsel people from all over the world, from all different walks of life and religions and faiths. Are you seeing that just across the board, or is that kind of an American problem? What's your assessment?
Well, it was more of a European problem before it became an American problem, but America and Europe is struggling with it. Western culture in general struggles with marriage. Third world countries don't have as much trouble with it, but it is an issue that I think is coming worldwide. I think that Western culture is setting an example for the rest of the world, and that's one of the things that is their example, that you don't have to be married, and you can be single, and you get divorced, you can have affairs. I have to tell you about a funny story. I was invited by Sally Jesse Raphael to give to be on TV years ago. I don't know if any of you, probably none of you have ever seen Sally Jesse Raphael. Do I have that right? Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
she used to be the Oprah Winfrey
of
the 1980s. Well, she invited me to come on her show to talk about His and Eternities. His and Eternities had just come out. And I was on with two women, one that wrote a book on how women should have affairs because it will stretch them and become better people. And the other woman was a publisher of a woman's magazine. It was very, very liberal, very feminist. And the room was full of women, 200 women in the audience, not a man in sight, not a camera person was a man. There was no men. I was it. Okay. And so there I was with all these feminists. And I was talking about the value of marriage. And I was talking about infidelity being like heroin addiction, and it would destroy people. And that infidelity is about the worst thing anybody could possibly do to another human being. And to write a book about how to have it is to write a book about how to murder people.
Wow.
So I said that on the show,
Sure, went over really well.
I got a standing ovation. I got
Really?
a standing from the audience. And Sally, at the end of the show, said, "This book is one of the best I've ever read," brings it up, says that if I had had this book 15 years ago, my life would have changed for the better. I encourage everybody to buy this book. Okay, this came out a year after the book was published, and it wasn't in any bookstores. It was just sitting there in the warehouse. And as soon as I was on that show, it was ordered by bookstores all over the country. We sold out of the first 3,000 copies in a flash. They printed another 10,000. Those were gone in no time. And they started printing 50,000 at a time, which they've been doing ever since. So, that's an interesting story about how, as a man,
right?
As a man, I can reach a woman when I tell her that there's a real downside to doing things that hurt a family. And if you can be a great mother and you can be a great wife, you're going to have the greatest things in life. Now, you need a husband who's a great father and a great husband. But the point that I've made over and over again is that married life is terrific, and it is what God intended. He tells men to leave their father and mother and cleave to a woman who will be your wife, and the two of you will become one. We read that in Genesis chapter 3. Now, what's wrong with being single? Well, I know a lot of single people. But I will say this. Being married is terrific if you follow marriage in the way that God had intended, which is you care for each other in an extraordinary way. And that's the message I've been delivering now for 50 years.
That's awesome.
Right. Wow.
So
my wife wanted to inform me that she knows who you're talking about on that show. So, so we're all the guys just dragging our knuckles here, and clearly.
Yeah. So Dr. Harley, what just I guess kind of do just a quick overview. So maybe the amount of patients you've been treating, how long you've been married to Miss Joyce.
Well, I married Joyce when I was 21. I'm 81 now. So we've been married for 60 years.
Congratulations.
Joyce was 19, so she's 2 years younger. She probably didn't want me to talk about her age. I knew her for 6 years before we were married. I fell in love with her the moment I saw her. She was only 13 at the time, but we were at a beach party and I was impressed. And I started dating her a year later, and she broke up with me on numerous occasions for things that I did that were what you'd call immature, like give her a bag that had a snake in it because I thought that'd be fun. and hiding her purse and doing all sorts of other very immature things. And eventually I caught on. I began to learn what it took to get a girl to like you. And most guys, you know, girls have to teach them how to be a good date. And but you lose them in the process. I mean, you know, they don't ever date you again.
Right.
Joyce kept giving me one chance after another, and finally I got it figured out, and she fell in love with me, and we were married, and so that basically we've been in love for all those years. I've counseled hundreds of thousands of people.
Wow.
Of course, because of my book and radio show and my website, I've reached millions. My son, interestingly enough, has counseled somebody in every state of our nation and 40 countries.
Wow.
So my son is picking up where I'm leaving off someday, but he does a lot of counseling, and he works with marriage builders, and he has also counseled thousands and thousands of couples. So we do a lot of counseling. We see a lot of people. We influence a lot of people, and some people I counsel for a couple of weeks and they're on their way. Some people I counsel for a month. Some people I counsel for years. But the basic idea is that my attitude is I'm very optimistic about helping people, and even if it takes years, it's still worth doing.
Absolutely.
Sure. And that's not the only way you were doing it. You had, if I remember, you said correctly, that you had others who were helping you counsel, and, you know, got to go dive into that real fast. And then I think Brandon has a question for us as well.
Yeah, well, what I my 32 locations where I trained people to do the counseling, I got to a point where I didn't want to be an administrator anymore. And it was just too big. And so I got rid of all the clinics. I gave it to all the people, all the training I had. I said goodbye to everybody. And I started my website in 1995. My son joined me. My daughter joined me. My wife joined me. We hired about 10 people to work with us for support. And I've been using my website ever since. I have tried to train people. I've written a book called Effective Marriage Counseling that is for marriage counselors. You know, how do you do marriage counselor? Here's a book that will show you how to do it. But I'm not doing much training now anymore. Most of my work is directly with couples that are having problems.
Awesome. I wanted to kind of go back to a few things. So one of the things you had asked a question about, like what kind of boundaries people set at our age, and I guess boundaries is the definition of it for me is a little bit different. It's more of like guide rails. I liked how you said like guidelines, guide rails, but it's more of setting a standard of expectations, like you had said. And so, like a good example is like, a lot of people will either cuss or yell or scream or do things at each other. It's them versus the other person instead of them versus the problem. And so like those are the kind of things that I try to encourage when I speak of boundaries. But one of the questions.
Okay, basically, I would say, you know, if you want to call that a love buster, here are things not to do. Don't do these things. I would call those boundaries, and I would say, don't make demands. Don't be disrespectful. Don't be angry. Don't be dishonest with each other. Don't make decisions that don't include the interests of the other person. Now, if you want to call that generally the book on boundaries has a different meaning. If you read the book Boundaries, it has a different meaning. It basically is what you can't tell your spouse to do, kind of a thing. Now, I would argue that, that could be included in that. If you think about the policy of joint agreement, and you're not going to do anything that you don't both agree to enthusiastically, you're basically getting rid of boundaries, from my perspective.
That makes sense.
You know,
I think for me personally, and just my own, journey and doing a lot of counseling and things like that, I think boundaries applies more to people that aren't your spouse. Say a troublesome family member or someone who, things like that. I think that term makes a lot more sense because they're not an intimate relationship necessarily. I mean,
yes.
does that make sense to you? Or
Yeah, don't let other people control your lives.
right?
And learn how to say no. Assertiveness training really is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And no, I'd agree. I would be in agreement with that. For sure.
Okay, so one of the questions I had, just for the audience's sake, in case they haven't read the book, what are the 5 needs of a man and the 5 needs of a woman that you found through your studies?
On average, and you got to say,
on
I
average.
mean, really,
Sure,
when I wrote,
ballpark.
I rewrote my book. It just came out this year. His Needs, Her Needs. We took the subtitle out. Subtitle was Building a Affair-Proof Marriage. It's been that way for 35 years. Now the subtitle is Making Romantic Love Last. That's a new subtitle. Okay. There is less of an emphasis on infidelity, but it's still there. It's still there big time. The reason was that my editors were millennials, and they were millennial women. And they were telling me that my list of needs for men and women are outdated. That women don't have these 5 needs.
Because they're the experts, right?
They have the male needs. They said, and one of them especially said that my number 1 need is sexual fulfillment. So what are you going to do with that? And so I have to say that on average, even today in our society, yes, indeed, these 5 needs do in fact describe the average man. Now, that doesn't mean that the average man, if you talk about a man, is going to have all 5 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Might only have 4.
Sure.
Might only have 3. But if you add them all up, on average, these are the top 5 for men. So I start out by saying, don't let me tell you what your needs are.
Right.
Use my emotional needs questionnaire. It's free of charge. You can get it on my website, marriagebuilders.com. Go to the questionnaire section. You can download it. It's there for the taking. Fill out the questionnaire. I'm not telling you what your emotional needs are. But on average, the top 5 emotional needs for men is sexual fulfillment, recreational companionship, admiration, physical attractiveness, and domestic support. All for women, the average emotional needs are affection, intimate conversation, honesty and openness, family commitment, and
Financial support.
Financial support. There you go. I was asked that when I first was on TV. I told him, I said, "Don't ask me to remember the 10." What do you think the first? What do you think the first question was?
What are the 10? What are the 10?
What are the 10?
Yeah. That's kind of a lot. I mean, when you're
I gotta get these down. But yeah, and I think that there are many couples where they would say, those aren't mine. And my point is, do whatever makes each other the happiest. That's the point.
Right.
And the fact that men's needs aren't the same as women's needs kind of identifies a problem. And that is that you're probably not going to have much empathy for the other person if your needs are not the same. Mm-hmm. And if a woman doesn't have much of a need for sex and her husband does have a craving for sex all the time, he's thinking about it all day long, and she thinks that he's just weird, Well, a man might come to the same conclusion if she's thinking that, I've got to do this or that or the other thing that she wants that he doesn't feel the same need for. And so a conversation is a good example. I think men generally, conversation is great, but I'd rather have sex. And so the basic idea is, okay, again, you think about a couple going to bed at night at 10 o'clock, and she wants to talk and he wants to make love. All right. This is so common, and she's too tired to make love. He's too tired to talk. And that tells you a little bit about how much you get out of this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. A woman can wake up a man in the middle of the night and say, how would you like to make love? He's there. He's
Sounds
ready.
Great.
Sounds like a good idea. But if she wakes him up and says, I've been thinking about something. I'd like to talk to you about something. Doesn't work too well.
Oh.
See? Anyway, and I think of men that can wake a woman up and say, I'd like to talk something over with you. And there are women out there that will wake up in the middle of the night and say, yeah, I'd like to talk to you about this issue. I'm glad you woke me up to talk about it. It has to do with how much you need it, how much you want this so badly. So anyway, my attitude is, if you don't have the emotional need yourself, your spouse is going to have to give you a little help to make sure that meeting that need is enjoyable. So I think of the meeting of emotional needs as a responsibility on the one hand. I think that God intends us to be responsible for doing what it takes to make our spouses happy. But from the spouse that's receiving it, they have to think of it as a gift. Mm-hmm. And they have to appreciate it. And they can't think of it as something that is assumed.
Right.
They have to be thankful for getting something that they need. So whether it's intimate conversation or whether it's sexual fulfillment or even admiration, I think that we have to appreciate what we're getting from our spouse that we need. And we have to make it easy for them to meet that need. And so that requires a little bit of conversation to get it right.
Sure. And I was going to make a quick statement. So just for instance, you said one of the needs, physical attractiveness. Today's society has reversed the shame. Guys or women that want their spouse to be physically attractive are considered shallow or, canceled or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's such a shame, because you should want your spouse to be a better person, whether that be physically, whether that be mentally or spiritually. You should want every aspect. And of course, you want them to be physically attractive. So I would like to say to those who have that need, don't feel ashamed of that, because society today is telling you to be ashamed of that. And that is not right, because it is okay to want somebody to look good. It's not, society is congratulating so many people for the wrong things, and everyone gets a participation trophy. It's like, no, there's a reason models are models, because they work hard and they go after things, and it's like,
there's a book that was published this year, actually by the same publisher that publishes my book, who is very critical of his needs, her needs, because of the chapter I have on physical attractiveness. That's it. That's it. And so the basic feeling I've tried to defend myself on that particular need forever. But it is what got me to pay attention to Joyce, I got to tell you. And still does, by the way. I am still very attracted to her physically. And is it my number one emotional need? Maybe, All I know is that it sure makes me happy just to look at her.
That's right. Absolutely.
And I think for men to be embarrassed about their emotional needs is to ignore the fact that this is what men fall in love for. I mean, this is how you fall in love. And for a spouse to ignore that is to do two things. Number one is you want your spouse to be in love with you. You want to do what it takes to make your spouse fall in love with you. But also, it's a very important part of caring for your spouse. I think that looking good for your spouse is an act of care. And again, I try hard to defend myself, but there are a lot of women out there, that, including my editors, that think I'm just not hitting the mark.
I agree 100%. And self-care is something that is missing from men, because it got such a stigma, just like, seeking therapy, a lot of men just suppress everything. And like, there's an example in your book about a man who wasn't practicing self-care. And then he's like, my wife doesn't want to touch me. It's, well, buddy, you smell like a sack of garbage,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
I mean, clean yourself up. But then at the same time, you mentioned that the wife can reward him for cleaning himself up, for doing self-care. So there are ways for you to work as a team for that specific problem. And that's one of the things I really loved in the book. So
Yeah, and
hygiene is a big part of physical attractiveness.
mm-hmm.
And just saw an ad today about a hygiene product where they said it's better than taking a shower, and I thought to myself, you know, they're on the right track there, I think.
Well, just for Dustin, since he couldn't make it, and he always does a shameless plug, I wish we could cue the Old Spice noise right now. Just give a shameless plug to Old Spice.
Yeah.
Well, you know what the label says. You know, if your grandfather hadn't used this, you wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
That's on Old Spice.
That's funny. That's good. That's good.
That's great.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could just actually expand a little bit more on some of the flack you've taken, and yeah. So we've covered physical attractiveness. I'm sure you took a lot of heat for sexual fulfillment, especially in today.
Lots.
I'm sure it's taken increased, notoriety.
All
I
of the
guess.
men's needs, right? Really,
Right.
if you think about all the men's needs, domestic support, you can imagine the kind of flack I've gotten on
Right.
that one. And even admiration is something that, well, they don't deserve it, So if you think of the top 5 needs: sexual fulfillment, recreational companionship, admiration, physical
attractiveness, and then domestic support.
domestic support. I mean,
Yeah.
Women will argue on all of those
Mm-hmm.
to say he shouldn't need it. And men will argue the same thing about the woman's needs. They'll say she wants too much conversation. She wants too much affection. Why is she so incredibly focused on honesty and openness? I don't like telling her about everything that's going on in my life. It shouldn't be necessary. And, it is the lack of empathy for somebody that isn't like you. And I don't know if you ever you came across John Gray, of course. Men Are From Mars. People don't know about his wife, ex-wife, probably the third one in the lineup, Barbara DeAngelis. And she actually taught him everything he ever knew about promoting himself. She was largely responsible for helping him with the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Well, Barbara DeAngelis wrote some other books too. And I love one of the books she wrote that starts her book out by saying that she has met an alien. And the alien is just so incredibly attractive and so interesting. And she's just so willing to spend time with him, and she's just perfect. And then the alien turns into this horrible person. And she says, that's what men are, aliens. They start out being wonderful, and they do everything that you want, and you just can't imagine not having a relationship. And then they turn into something that you don't like, and that you eventually hate it. And it's just so annoying that you can't spend a moment with them. And I think that it was a marvelous introduction to the book for her, and just so funny. I mean, she is just the funniest writer. But I don't know that she's ever been successful with a man. I wish I could help her. I wish she would someday. But the basic idea is, men can really turn into absolute horrible people. Mm-hmm. Women can do the same thing, but not as much. My experience has been that men need more training in how to be a good husband and father than the average woman does. That's been my experience. I would say that, and this is tough to say to men, but I would say that 70% of marital problems are men's fault. And that a man needs more counseling than women. Now, I wrote his needs, her needs to be balanced. But you know what? I really wanted to reach men.
Yeah.
I wanted men to be able to read this book and say, you know, he understands me. He's on my side. Most of the books on marriage are all about meeting women's needs, really, when it comes right down to it. Very little about men meeting men's needs and not much about helping men out. And so I wrote his needs, her to try to help men out. But technically, I want to help men out by teaching them how to meet a woman's emotional needs and how to be a great marriage partner. So my mission, to some extent, to a great extent, I would say, is to men. And I have felt this way throughout my entire career. I am far more effective in working with men because I think men need my help more than women do.
Interesting. So 70-30 according to Dr. Harley. That's good though. I think part of that might be kind of cultural too, right? I think you predicted it, right? Marriage is going to disappear back in the 80s, I think is what you said, but the sexual revolution and things like that back in the 60s and 70s obviously probably started that spiral. And just speaking personally, looking at a lot of the challenges that my wife and I have faced, I would argue that I'm definitely more on the 60-ish% side of the thing there. So I can kind of support that anecdotally, but
I did a focus group with single millennial men and women. And it was fascinating to me, absolutely fascinating, because the men and women both, they were in separate groups, women in one group, men in another. They were all afraid of getting married. They were not looking forward to getting married. They were saying that horrible things are going to happen to me if I get married. And what is interesting was that the women were afraid that men would take over and try to control me. And I wouldn't be able to resist them. I would become putty in their hands. All I need to do is be in love with a man, and I become a fool in a relationship with a man. And the men were afraid of marriage because sooner or later, the wife's going to find somebody else, divorce him, and he'll be spending the rest of his life supporting some other guy that isn't working, that is living with his ex-wife and spending his money raising the children. So they're afraid of going broke after they get divorced. So it's a fear factor. And I think we have that today far more than what Joyce and I had no fear whatsoever. We walked into our wedding chapel with great anticipation and with absolutely no regrets that we were going to get married. I never have. And I can't say the same for millennial couples today. I think, first of all, they have parents that have been divorced. Mm-hmm. And so they look at the parents and say, this could happen to me.
Right.
And my spouse could become somebody else. And the person that I think loves me and cares for me is all of a sudden going to decide, I don't want to do that anymore. Well, where will I be? So I think that in today's marriages, there's a lot of fear, and to some extent, rightfully so.
Right.
Yeah. And something that added to that 100% that made it epidemic, I'd say, is social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Social media provides temptation everywhere and causes a lot of issues within marriages. And
affairs on how to have an affair.
Yeah.
A websites on how to have an affair. Ashley Madison. It's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous that there would be a website on how to hook up with somebody that's married.
Yeah.
And we come across people that have used that website a lot. And then I try to help them recover from their affair. So it's just horrible. Worst thing that could you ever do to your spouse is to have an affair. Nothing worse.
So we know that your time's wrapping up here, but one quick question: what is the biggest piece of advice you can give to a dad?
Love his mother. Love the mother of your children. The best thing you can give your children is to take good care of their mother.
Good.
And then the next piece of advice I would say is raise your children as a partner with your wife. Be partners in raising your children and make your decisions together and make sure that they see you as an example of what they want you to be. And they're on the same page when it comes to training you.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, unfortunately, Dr. Harley did only have an hour with us, so he does need to go. Thank you so much, Dr. Harley, for joining us tonight, and we sincerely appreciate your time. And
appreciate being with you too. Appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
It was awesome. So it was really great to talk to you about the book and,
Thanks, Dr. Harley.
you know what's impacted so many lives, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
All righty. So we're going to keep going. Dr. Harley's going to go. I think he has a session to get to, so he's going to go ahead.
I got more counseling to do.
That's right.
Tonight.
The work is never done.
Right.
All right.
Well,
so
my wife is in choir practice.
All righty. Well, thank you, Dr.
Right.
Harley, and we'll see you later. Thank you so much. All right. So that was obviously a very cool experience for us here. And I forgot to mention at the start because we wanted to be sensitive about time. Dustin unfortunately couldn't join tonight. He was traveling home from Europe and flight cancellations, delays, all kinds of crazy stuff. So he, I think, just landed maybe a few minutes ago, and unfortunately couldn't join. So we're really bummed about that, but maybe we'll just have to get Dr. Harley back sooner rather than later. So I wanted to take a quick moment too to say, Dr. Harley, we will be sending you a beautiful Present Fathers podcast thermos. And this was designed and made by Lunar Branding. So I want to take a minute, and Justin, if you can show off the wonderful hat and the polo. We've got branded swag now. So my good friend runs Lunar Branding. It is a creative ad agency that specializes in promotional products and swag. And they will work with you to maximize your marketing dollars and help you shoot for the moon. So we will put a plug in here for Lunar Branding. They helped us put all this together. They gave us all the ideas, the coaching about, hey, this is what looks good, this is what doesn't. Because honestly, I had no clue where to go with that. But the products are absolutely top notch. So I'm already looking at how I can use this for my civilian job outside of this podcast for giving things to my customers and things like that. But had to take a minute, and thank you, Greg, for the awesome swag. Let's go into just initial reactions, guys.
Let's
Brandon,
unpack.
Justin.
Let's unpack,
yeah, let's unpack.
man.
That was a lot.
All right. So I tried not to get too controversial and ask too much, but there was definitely some questions I wanted to ask, but time didn't allow, just because we've had this conversation. Society really is blocking the way we want to speak and think and do. And I'm kind of glad we got to unpack a little bit of the attractiveness thing and the sexual thing. And so it was good to hear his perspective, because he seems very equalized in the views of everybody, men, women, whatever. And it was just nice to hear, him stick to his guns, even though other people have kind of tried to push back on that. And he stuck with what he believed in. And I love that. That's his why, like we've talked about. So I think that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Brandon, any initial thoughts, reactions?
Man, I love that his version of boundaries is Love Busters, and that he kind of blew my mind a little bit in the fact that the way I see boundaries, right? The way
I've never heard Brandon shut up. I was like,
the way I see boundaries definitively is different than the way most people see boundaries. So I guess my wording and my outlook on that is I'm definitely gonna use Love Busters instead. Like, stop busting up your love, man. That was wonderful. And I think one of the things he touched on that was in the guy's needs, which was recreational companionship. that is such a vital thing. And in his book, he goes into describing that most men will go out with other men and do recreational things, and he encourages men to always go out with their wives recreationally, because the wife can be felt left out. And there's just a bunch of other reasons he talks about in that chapter.
Well, one of the biggest is like you're missing an opportunity of one of the things that fills your cup the most. You're basically cutting your wife out of the equation to even give you giving her the chance to even do that for you, which builds romantic love. So it's like give her the option, give her the opportunity. I just sorry to on this one. It was such a mind blower for me because like. I've done some of this kind of work in our marriage counseling and things like that, identifying what matters and being empathetic to your spouse and that kind of thing. And it wasn't like as I chewed on that chapter about recreational activities together and how typically important that is for men, I started like unpacking. It's like, wow, that is really important to me. And I don't know why I haven't put more emphasis on like making sure that we're having those opportunities. So I did his worksheet. And I sat Whitney down. I was like, hey, fill this out real quick. And she's like, why? Yeah, I explained it. And she did it. And we were really surprised to see that, like, there was a lot of things that we had in common that we both rated, like, top of the line. Hey, these are things we really love to do that I had just assumed she wouldn't want to do. Like, one of them is NHL hockey. She loves We can't do it all the time. It's expensive. But I thought she went with me one time years ago because she was just like wanting to, let me experience Nashville Predators and seeing a game. And she was like, no, I love it. Like, I want to do that all the time. And I was like, what? So we've been like for 8 years, we haven't gone to a hockey game. Here we go. Big miss. So anyway, go to his website, look at the worksheets. They may seem a little bit, like, oh, work, but they're really easy. Just knock them out. And I promise it'll raise some epiphanies. But sorry, back to you.
No, not at all. And to that point, there's a recommendation in his book where he says, go through it with like a certain color highlighter and highlight what stuck out to you, what's important to you as far as the needs when he lists them. Whatever examples just shine in the book, go through, highlight it, have your wife go through with a different color highlighter, highlight what sticks out, what's good for her needs, have her do that. And then both of you go back through it together and see where the differentiation is in your highlighters, but not only that, but where you're similar, like you were saying. And so like, that's a beautiful idea. Like I'm excited to do that with my wife, but recreational stuff. Like I always suggest just try everything with your wife because you never know what she'll end up loving and you'll end up loving. And then you can just do it all the time together. And that creates a healthy emotional intimacy and good conversation because you have good time together. So that was exciting. One other thing I wanted to touch on, he had mentioned that men have a tendency to close doors in certain parts of their lives because we compartmentalize everything, whereas women don't. Everything's just kind of fluid and seeming. And I think one of the biggest things based on reading his book that kind of spoke to me was our personal privacy as men kills emotional intimacy and emotional conversation with our wives. So if you have been somebody that's been a private person or has been forced to be a private person through the raising by your parent or parents, I suggest absolutely be the first thing you work on. Open up to your wife. And I think that alone is just going to open up a whole world to you because you'll find that you have somebody to lean on instead of just thinking that you're alone in the process. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a beautiful point. I don't know if you guys had seen anything or heard anything that kind of stuck out for you. I'd love to hear it.
I'm guilty of this, that lately Ainsley and I have had a conversation. I need to be more cognizant of the things that she asks and like listen better. Just because I get so phased out with work, and when I phase hard. I don't hear things that I'm hearing, but I'm not hearing it. And, that's my biggest downfall. So that's something I'm personally working on. And he's, that kind of brought that to my attention with this book. I have not done the assessment yet. I wanted to let her watch this podcast and, see what her thoughts were. And then
we're
going to do this together.
What's up?
Dustin.
Oh my God.
You just missed it. Oh man.
Horrible.
Yeah.
He's going to cry.
Don't worry. We'll get him back just for you.
Don't fly Iceland Air.
Okay, well,
Okay.
now we
Yeah.
know.
Noted. Well, Dustin, if it makes you feel better, buddy, we're gonna really try hard to get Dr. Harley back on with his wife, and because we had such a lovely conversation. She's such a lovely woman.
She's the one who actually set this all up. Like,
Yeah,
she took all the calls.
and thank you, Joyce. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. You're
thank you
such
so
a
much.
Thank you,
lovely,
Joyce.
lovely lady.
Yes.
I'm never leaving my house again, so I'll be there. I'm ready.
Dustin, real quick. Did they have cookies on the flight?
We had nothing. So get this: there's no food on an international flight. It's unbelievable. There's an app where you can order stuff, but there's no menu, and the app didn't work. So
you flew like 8 hours with not like a snack or anything?
yeah, I did an OMAD day. It was great. I took your advice, George.
Jeez, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
Well, man, we're really sorry that your whole family had to get bounced around and rough travel day. So, I mean,
Tim?
if
What
you
were
need to
guys
go
at?
rest, we got it.
Yeah.
No, I'd love to chat with you guys if you got a few minutes.
Awesome.
But,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For a while, so
Yeah.
no worries.
Actually, I wanted to ask you, since this is one of your idols, and I hate you missed him, which kind of sucks, but how would you say that the book kind of changed your life, or that Dr. Harley affected you in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't have a lot of great male role models in terms of marriage relationships. I had a lot of great dads, a lot of great people at work, a lot of skills, a lot of love, all that. But as far as like lasting marriages, there's a few people in my family that have done well with it, but most of the men have not. They've just kind of struggled with either fidelity or just lots of reasons, as I'm sure you learned over the past couple hours chatting with Dr. Harley about why marriages fail. And I saw a lot of examples of what not to do, but didn't see a lot of examples of what to do. So I knew going into it, I wanted to be the exception to the rule. And so I told Kim beforehand that, I was going to do a lot of research. We do some soul searching together. And, so we started with Dr. Harley's book. I honestly can't tell you where I got the recommendation from it. It might have been something as simple as a Google search. I wish I could tell you exactly why I got turned on his material, but I read some other stuff. It didn't really inspire me. And then I read his material and went, oh my gosh, this is really, really strong. Everything about it makes a lot of sense. He's a realist, but he's also an optimist. It just really spoke to me. The Reddit talked to Kim about it. We talked about what our, it's funny. I want to say love language because I almost feel like the people that wrote love language borrowed from.
Oh, they ripped it off. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. He talked about that. But anyway.
Heard it here first. Dr. Harley did it.
Yeah, exactly. But so as far as what my needs are, they're not the exact 5 male needs. Kim's needs aren't the exact 5 female needs, but they're pretty close. It was probably 60-40. And we were able to identify what our needs were and when they weren't being met, and how important that was to us before we got married. That put us on a rock solid foundation. And we talk about it not as often as it should. Probably every couple of years, we'll go back and reference the material, and talk about it. And it's always great. It's honestly a lot of fun for us. It's a great way to reconnect. And it's a beautiful thing in our marriage because we both know that an untended marriage, just like an untended garden, will start to get overgrown with weeds.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We know this, right? That friends who actively care for their marriages have great marriages, and our friends that don't do that, sometimes they're just amazing people and their marriages do great, but that's definitely the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, definitely. So that's actually a really good segue into one thing he recommended for parents is his needs, her needs for parents.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And this really outlines that, typically what happens is parents put all their attention on the children, and for 20 years your relationship gets put on a back burner, and then your kids leave the house and basically you don't have a relationship anymore because it was all about the kids. So this is I haven't read it yet. I will admit I'm going to do it after this. And it apparently is the outline for how to ensure that you still, like you were just saying, you're tending to that garden of your marriage and your relationship, which he also just said with us that that's one of the most important things you can do as a father is to have a good marriage and relationship with your children's mother. So yeah, go check that book out too.
I'm looking forward to reading that. Yeah, that'll be great.
I think all of us need to read it. Yeah.
Yeah,
course.
absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean, romance with a mother is just as good, if not better, as you all know, than romance, with either just your married wife or, without kids. But it's different, right? It has a totally different set of needs.
a lot
you
more
know,
pre-planning involved.
Red
yeah.
light, green light.
Oh my gosh, red light, green light, exactly.
Logistics.
Yeah, no, because
Well-
spontaneity is great when you're 25 and you're just dating. Spontaneity is really tough when you're 40 and you have a 2-year-old.
Yep.
Really
Yeah,
tough.
he
It
gave us a
happens-
statistic before
Yeah.
the show that really surprised us all.
Mhm.
So sorry to interrupt. It's just before
No,
I forget
please.
what the
This is really
statistic
good.
was.
Yeah.
So he told us that the first year of marriage is the second most. Was it second? Correct, George? Do you remember? I think it was.
Well, he said
second
there's
most likely
two distinct moments in marriage
you're most
typically
likely to get
statistically that most people get
divorced.
divorced, and one of them was what you were just about to say.
So it's the year one of
Of
the
marriage.
marriage.
Mhm.
Because
Okay.
it's like after the romance falls off, people realize, oh, this person's horrible. You know,
Honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
God
stuck
falls
with them in the
down.
house, yeah.
Oh.
And the second, which was very surprising to me, which I guess it shouldn't be for some, but the first year of your child's life.
Yes.
People get divorced on the first year of the child's life.
Oh,
Yeah. So he said statistically, those are the 2 years where most divorces happen.
Oh my god!
Right,
I feel like I
because
was
the
flooded
baby
out for a couple
distracts.
years
Yeah.
just for the baby, but I guess it's so hard you just can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is tough. That's something we don't talk about as dads a lot, but yeah, the first year is very hard because you have no clue what you're doing. The mother has instincts and they're just killing you and everything. And
Well, and
They're usually-
both parties are not getting their needs met. Wow, I could talk. Because so much of it gets focused on the baby, right?
Yeah.
And so I mean, I get from a very statistical point of view, I can see how that happens. And
That and affairs occur because like 9 out of 10 times an affair is going to start emotionally. It's just somebody at your office
Just a
going
friend.
out of their way
Yeah.
to be nice
Mhm.
emotionally,
Just
and
a
then the
friend.
feelings start creeping in. You're emotionally attached to them, and then out of nowhere, you swear you'll never be physical, and then boom, it just hits physical.
Right.
And so you have to safeguard your marriage fiercely. Like you cannot allow women to have emotional connections with you
All right,
other
Wonder
than your
Man.
wife. Because if you do, man, you're treading in dangerous waters. I mean, I wouldn't throw chum out into an ocean and hey, just jump out in there. I'm not going to do that. It's just stupid. And there's a lot of men that do
That are
that.
just sharks. We're just sharks, just circling.
Yeah.
each
No,
other.
I love it.
Like, I mean, you wouldn't do that. So why in the world would you become emotionally attached to somebody that's not
Yeah.
your wife?
He
so,
talked about that at length in his needs, her needs, and
Mhm.
how
Yep.
it forms an irrational response to something that's how he even highlights committed people with principles do it all the time because it creates, it's like a drug, it creates this
Yeah.
emotional irrational reaction, and you basically brought it upon yourself in essence.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
pretty.
Yes.
It's definitely thought provoking, and especially Justin, you brought it up earlier, social media. I mean that's part of why I deleted social media. It was just it's distraction. It's it's nice to just unplug and not worry about all that kind of crap. But
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's everywhere, man. Like Instagram, TikTok,
temptation.
all that kind of stuff. It's just and
Because you'll have somebody who is very good looking on the outside.
I don't want to.
not
I
so
don't want
much
to. Yeah, I
on
mean,
the
it's just
inside, and they just jump.
it's just
in
another
your
avenue for
DMs.
someone to tempt you
Yeah.
or any of that kind of crap. And so, I mean, quite frankly,
Mhm.
it's just easier to not deal with it.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
Take yourself out of the situation. It's the best way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not about willpower. It's about availability. And if you're constantly putting yourself, Chris Rock isn't 100% accurate about this because obviously we have control over this, but I'm sure you've heard the joke. A man is as faithful as his options. Right? So he talks about that a little bit, but because it's true. If you have a ton of options in front of you and you put yourself in a dangerous situation all the time, there are some just unbelievable men out there who can say no to that. But even if you do and you never have an affair, that's emotional time that you could have been
Right.
building with your wife, and you're building it with another woman instead. And
So it's an
why?
emotional affair.
Yeah, what was the point of that? Exactly. You would have been better off building those beautiful relationships with your wife.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I talk to you real quick about Munich and Oktoberfest and how?
Yeah,
Go.
yeah. Let's
That's
hear
what I've
all
been
about
wanting
it.
to hear
Yeah,
about. I was
yeah,
about
yeah.
to ask you about it.
How was it?
My gosh, you have to go. Just don't fly Icelandair. Again, do not.
Sponsor
Go just-
Delta.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Fly Delta.
Lufthansa.
Yeah, Lufthansa, great, exactly, all good options. So, got there, stayed at great hotels. We went to the Eagle's Nest, which is Hitler's bunker and hideout.
Yep.
It was incredible. He was like 2 hours from getting out of Berlin and escaping to his, his hideout, like his basically evil mountain lair, you know, and they never would have caught him probably.
Wow.
So, I mean, we're so lucky we caught him in Berlin and, you know, got rid of him. Oktoberfest was absolutely amazing, and it hadn't happened in 2 years. So this was 3 years of kind of excitement.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, the city was so much energy, so much excitement, very friendly, very happy people. I speak pretty good German, so it was super exciting getting to chat with other Germans and, you know, be able to use the language. I'm kind of exhausted from a week of using a foreign language. It really wears you out.
Yeah.
But that was really cool. We went to Neuschwanstein Castle. I'm sure you guys saw the photo that I posted. You get on this rickety old scary bridge that it just is like over a gap of nothing. So if you go too far left or right, like you will fall. So I'm leaning back, trying to get the perfect photo, and I'm like, I better not fall. And it's like raining on us and windy and just, you know, crazy day. But I mean, beautiful. So the Disney castle is modeled after.
I was gonna say it's got the real big spires on it, right? Very, very sharp. Yeah,
exactly. So Walt Disney copied this castle in southern Germany when he wanted to build his castle. Went to Austria. That's an incredible country. Really, really beautiful, wonderful people. And I think
where did you go in Austria?
Salzburg.
Birthplace of Mozart.
Yeah. So we got to see Mozart's house. That was really cool.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, and of course, birthplace of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Not Salzburg, near there.
No.
Put the cookie down.
Did you go? Did you go up on the? Did you go up to the Festum, the giant fortress?
No, that would have been crazy. Really cool. I know it. You know, and if we'd changed the trip a little bit, we could have spent more time in Austria and less in Munich. But we're having so much fun at the Deutsches Museum, which is I think the largest museum in the world, at least of its kind, is the science and technology. They had an entire like 10,000 square foot room devoted just to bridges.
Wow.
The Germans are all about efficiency, and one of our tour guides gets on the Autobahn and just starts going 120 miles an hour out of nowhere without warning us. And we're all like, whoa, what is going on? And he's like, you can drive as fast as you want here. You know, don't worry about it.
That's funny.
And I'm looking at the needle. It's 260 km, right? And he's in this van, right? Just booking it.
In a van?
A van?
In a van.
You almost lost your life, bro.
I'd be white knuckling it, man. That's a little fast in a van. You're flying in a brick.
Yeah, basically. Tires are only rated to certain speeds. And
no,
I was like, weren't made for that.
Great.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so on the way back, airlines can kind of legally do this. They denied us boarding due to overbooking. So there's 300 people getting on the flight. We happen to be the lucky ones that they overbooked. There were 2 people who couldn't get on the flight. It was us. So when that happens, the airline owes you like $2,000 in compensation. Plus they have to get you on the flight the next day. So that would have been cool. But they said, oh, we can get you on a flight to San Francisco, back to Orlando today if you hurry. Right. So we go, okay, great. We'll take the Lufthansa flight. You know, we'll do that because that's cheaper for them to buy you a ticket than it is to pay you all this cash. Right. Well, we get there, we get to the gate, and the lady says, we see your name booked on the reservation, but you don't have a ticket, so I can't let you on this flight. And so we go, you got to be kidding me. Like, help. And then we see the full plane leave, and she's like, I tried to help you. I couldn't do it, whatever. So then we call Icelandair back because there's no Icelandair terminal anywhere in Munich. And they said, well, the flights are all full on the flight the next day to Orlando, so we can't help you. We can get you out on like Friday. So I was nice on the phone, and then Kim, kind of a boss, gets on the phone
Kim
and
don't
says,
play, man. I wouldn't want to piss her off.
This is not acceptable.
Mama Bear was tired.
Mama Bear was exhausted, got on the phone, and Mama Bear got it done. They said, well, turns out we can sneak you through Boston, then to Orlando after that. And she said, that's fine. Whatever, we'll take that.
So you're in Boston right now?
I'm in Boston, Logan.
Okay.
At a $400 a night hotel. So thanks. That's nice.
Nice.
Yeah. So I don't know why airlines do this because it costs them so much money when they screw up like this, but it must save them money in the long run. I don't know.
I've got to tell you just a quick story. So our honeymoon to Bora Bora last year, when we got married, Ains and I were supposed to take a connector flight from LAX to Bora Bora. Now, there's only 2 flights. There's one in the middle of the day, and there's one that's a red eye at 1 a.m. in the morning. And that's 1 a.m. our time. It's 3 a.m. in LA. So we get to LA. We hang out for 3 or 4 hours. We're waiting to get on this flight. We had booked this 6 months in advance with the travel agency. Well, the French ambassador with French Polynesia decided during COVID that they were going to enact an EDIS form. This happened like a few days before we went, and nobody told anybody, not travel agencies, not a letter that went out to anybody, nothing. So we get all the way to LA, flying from Lafayette, Louisiana to Houston, Houston to LA. And it's 1 o'clock in the morning. We're trying to get on this plane. My wife and I, whether people like this or not, we're vaccinated because we're both in medical. This was a big thing. They were letting people who had just nothing going on, no vaccinations, no cares, barely a passport, all these people are getting on, they're drunk, they're acting a fool. And we're just sitting there, trying to get to our honeymoon. Well, long story short, they lose our luggage. We don't get it back till 3:30 in the morning, which is probably like 5:30 our time. They tell us they'll get us on a flight a day and a half later. So we ended up hanging out with one of her girlfriends from dental school that was her roommate. And we made it like a little trip out of it. But my wife at the time was like, why would this happen? Why would this happen? And I'm like, look, you just got to have faith. There's a reason for this. The plane could go down. We don't know. And obviously the plane did not go down, but we had to reschedule all of her patients, everything. A month later, we get out there, we have the EDIS form. We get there, they let us on the flight, and we are so ecstatic. Well, we ended up, that's where Bennett came from, was that trip. So God was saying, hey man, hold your horses. We got something in store for you. So it's just kind of funny that like I've dealt with something similar, and I can't tell you how frustrating it is to see your wife, for sure.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Well, you got a baby out of the deal, so it could have been a lot worse. That's
Absolutely.
You
got Munich.
Yeah. What's an EDIS form?
EDIS form is like just saying you get permission to come into the country. That's all it is.
Okay.
All you have to do is get some French ambassador to say, oh yeah, they're cleared to come in. I thought a passport was for that. Evidently, it's not.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Well, we're glad Munich was awesome, and the rest of Germany and Austria.
I'm jealous.
Unfortunate that your travel home was not so great, but I guess can't really control that. So, wanted to bring it back on topic a little bit here. I wanted Dustin, since it was your recommendation to read this book in the first place, and then it spawned into interviewing Dr. Harley. What was probably the thing from that book that stuck out the most to you when you had first read it, and do you still think that that's the most important thing you learned from it, or has that kind of evolved over time?
I think just the first thing that pops into my head is our popular culture tells us that men's sexual needs don't matter, right? That if you as a husband, are not happy with sex, like that's just kind of part of marriage, and that you're expected, as marriages go on. It's kind of a running joke, right? Is that, sex is rare and kind of terrible, in marriages after a few years. That's just kind of how they're supposed to be. And I don't know who created that idea, whether it was sitcoms or where it came into our popular culture. But I mean, that idea is ruinous towards marriages, right? Because that's a basic fundamental need that men have. And it is okay as a man to say, I am sexually unsatisfied. Can you please help? So that's really what stuck out to me the most. Let me, sorry, we got room service coming in. I'm just getting super hungry. Let me grab this real quick. I want to jump off.
You and food, never.
All right. Justin, same question to you. What was like the most, the thing that surprised you most about reading that book?
Surprised me most, I'd probably have to say just the simplicity to it. We don't think about the other person's needs so much as we're thinking about like problems and how to solve them.
Right.
And we don't realize that their needs are the solution.
Yeah.
I guess because, we're guys. We eat meat. We're dumb, so we kind of need a little guidance every now and again. And so, yeah, I mean, like, and it's kind of funny because it's happening at a time like where Ainsley and I are in, a spot with a new baby and we're tired and we're exhausted, and she had a little postpartum, so like both of us are just worn completely out, and we're already at that end of the rope every day with our own lives, and so with each other it gets stressful, just because we're trying to make things work for each other. We're trying to make things work for his schedule because he has a very needy schedule, and my wife's the one that shoulders most of that. And I tried to explain, later in life, I'll be the one that shoulders baseball practices and sports and everything else, or whatever he's interested in, school, that kind of stuff. But it's as a man, unfortunately, you feel like you're doing enough, but sometimes you're not. And that's something that was kind of eye-opening for me, was that I looked inwardly to my marriage and realized that I could be doing better for Ainsley and for my wife, and just, letting her have the support that she needs, because I feel like I'm doing enough, but there's things that I'm not hearing or seeing or doing. And so it's played a little bit, it's in the back of my mind. And this book helped bring that to light. So that, I think that would be the answer to that question, I guess, the best way I could say it.
Okay. It's good. Dustin, sorry, you were going to get some grub, so
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Kim's taking a shower. She is absolutely exhausted. That was that was a lot of travel. So that really stuck out to me. And then, for me, I think affection is probably more important to me than it is to Kim, generally speaking. Her needs are more for conversation, openness. Those are kind of bigger things for her. And so that was important, kind of nailing that down, because to me, if I have a need for affection or a need, for sexual gratification or something like that, my thought would have been, well, I'll just be really nice and say nice things and bring flowers and, rub her back, whatever. That is not her. I mean, she likes that, but that's not the most important thing to her at all. And so I think not meeting a lot of her needs, not because, again, as Dr. Harley says, out of ignorance and not necessarily because of malice. I did not want to meet her needs. I wasn't trying to be lazy. I just didn't know what was important to her and what was not. So I was meeting needs that were not important to her, but I was not meeting her important needs. And so by having that,
it's like waste. In a way, it's wasted
awesome
effort.
Way to put it.
Yeah. A lot of wasted effort. Exactly. Yep. And then I feel badly because I put all this effort in.
Right. You're like, hey, I did all this. Why isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Come on. Yeah. Let's, have a little fun. And it was not working. But it was easily fixed, right? I mean, it wasn't like this was this insurmountable problem where, we're just never going to be compatible. It was just, let's talk about what our needs are. And, those not being met. Let me work on that, put my effort into a better place. It's very, I think it's important to look at marriages the same way you do other types of relationships. We think it's a special thing where you're just supposed to know.
Right.
And it is a very special thing, but what you need to do to have a functional relationship with your boss or your kids or your friends is often very similar to what you need for a functional relationship with your wife. And that's very hard for us, I think, to appreciate and understand, because it seems like it shouldn't require the same kind of skills, but it really does.
And it's even more complicated because you're with this person a lot more than anyone else. You're in their space and in their face constantly. And you're dealing with the stress of a child, schedules for you, for them, for, everything. You're dealing with financial burdens. You're dealing with everything together.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you don't have love there's no way of it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that you kind of hit on right there was, us men, we're so simplistic in our approach to meet their needs because we want our needs met. So there's always this ulterior motive. And it's like, if we can just be genuine and intentional in meeting their needs, that our needs, if they know them and they know what we want, should be something that naturally occurs. Like sex, for example. You treat your wife well, intentionally and genuinely, and it's not with an ulterior motive. Like, oh, I bought her these flowers so I can have sex later. No, it's I'm going to be intentional.
Eat these chocolates.
Right.
I'm going to meet her needs, and then it's just going to be a natural flowing thing, So
that's a great point.
I think that's one thing, guys. I think that's one of the things that guys do, and we need to fix that.
Well, I think there's a lot of like bad training about that, right? Like it's like, I mean, we're laughing about it, but I think that's been pushed in our society, right? Oh, buy her cards, buy her flowers, and that's what'll make her love you. And it's like, that's not the way she loved you in the first place. Like, that's not why she was attracted to you in the first
Chocolates
place.
and diamonds, baby. Chocolates
Yeah.
and
So,
Ma'am, I'm your plumber. I'm here to lay some pipe.
he think Dustin's like, I'm so funny.
Oh,
You guys
Oh,
are
man.
terrible.
all right,
Oh,
we gotta
Dustin.
stop. We gotta get out of here. Yeah,
Um,
Dustin, I was curious why you didn't get your buddies at the Space Force to bring you home. Nice shirt, buddy.
Well-
Try to get this one next
Hang
time.
on, okay, there we go.
that's funny.
Oh god.
But no, so to answer my part here, just as much as we're intentional with our kids, and this is what stuck out for me, is that as much as we're intentional with our kids, we have to be that much more intentional with our wives.
Mhm.
Because again, we have to model what's healthy for our children. And, our children will see us in such a more positive light as they grow up, when they see a dad who loves their mom so intentionally and genuinely and meets her needs. And then it'll help them to be able to voice what their needs are and look for somebody that'll meet those needs in a proper manner when they're older and they get married. So that's what really stuck out for me, besides the whole privacy killing, intimate and emotional connection.
Yeah.
And then the recreational companionship. That was kind of a brilliant aha moment for me as well. I mean, I was sitting there mowing the yard and I heard that and I was like, I had to stop the mower and I'm like, man, all right, I got something on my list to add, and so it was definitely.
Well, to add to that point, actually, real quick, the most significant thing I think he said tonight, especially with children and what they pick up from us, do not ever, especially as the male, lose your temper.
Yeah.
Keeping a calm, cool demeanor, no matter what the situation, teaches your kid how to be, or if it's a boy, be a man, a girl, be a woman, being able to handle stressors and, have emotional intelligence, not to respond to things negatively.
Yeah.
And that's something that's so hard when you're in a charged situation with a spouse or with a friend or a family member. So it's nice and refreshing to hear him voice that, because I'm like, we're all guilty of that. And I've only met one or two guys I've ever seen who never lost their cool. And I'll tell you what, they were some of the coolest guys too. Like, they had great marriages, they had no issues in their life, and it was because they can always stay even keel.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to episode, I think it was 2, on emotional regulation and emotional intelligence. When you practice these things for yourself, they become a byproduct of how you act around your wife and your kids. And that, man, it's like, that's why we cover these certain topics, is because when you can hammer each of these topics one by one, and you take, it's like, climbing a mountain of fatherhood, you're taking one step at a time, and before you know it, you're at the top of the mountain. And you're one of those glorious guys that's like, I climbed Everest, but it's like the dad version, it's like, I don't lose my crap when I have no sleep and my kid's throwing stuff at my TV, or, whatever the case may be. It's like, you got to stay cool in those kind of situations. So,
for me, the thing that stuck out the most was, we already talked about the recreational piece. That was like a total aha moment. But just personally, my wife and I have done tons of counseling, a lot of work in our marriage, getting through a lot of different challenges. And it was just kind of like reinvigorating for me reading this book and being like, wow, we are doing a lot of these things right. It was like, it was another source saying, hey, these are the things that make a good marriage. And, it's not like I asked him to just tell me that, that's what you do. So it was like validating in a sense to see that a lot of the practices we've put in place, through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, are good, and it is good for our marriage and stuff. So that for me was, kind of a nice surprise reading this one. But yeah, I kind of wish I would have had this book, 10 years ago, and maybe I wouldn't have needed to have so many blood, sweat, and tears. So if you haven't read this book, do yourself a favor, go read it. It'll probably make you consider a couple things. The other point I wanted to really make is, he's taken a lot of flack for these things, physical attractiveness and sexual needs and all these kinds of things. But he reiterated it tonight in several occasions that a lot of the responsibility is on men, not women. Go have sex with your husbands, right? And when I was reading that too, when I was reading the book, I was feeling very convicted on several aspects. Like, man, like I need to provide this more intently for my wife. Like Brandon, you just said, purposefully, and being intentional about those things. That's that's a good challenge. It's a good call to action as men. That so he just to be clear, I didn't get the sense that he was attacking women or something. I think he said it, and multiple examples tonight he gave were, here, men, these are the things you need to do.
Yeah, we're in
So
the wrong. Yeah.
right, yeah, and so the other thing too, I just love about the simplicity of the book is it's just common sense. Like, make them happy,
Yeah.
they're gonna in turn eventually make you happy too. And don't do it like a sleazy car salesman or something, like used car salesman. But
Not a good
like
analogy, bro. I used to be a car salesman.
well, okay, there's a stereotype about used car salesmen for a reason. Just saying.
Okay.
But
Whatever you say, buddy. Thanks.
all right. Let me think of another one. Don't
What
do
do they
it
say
in
about
a
Army guys?
in
No,
a
I'm just kidding.
manipulative way. What, even Marines need heroes? But
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Woo,
Be
we just
intentional
lost half
about
our
it.
Marines. No.
Be intentional. Oh, come on, we're just joking.
I know.
Yeah. So, a
Yeah.
good point from Logan. Your kid. We're gonna star this one. Let's see if it. I think I can show it. There we go. Your kids watch every single day. If you have a daughter, she will look for someone like you and expect to be treated like you have treated her mom. Vice versa with a son. It sets grid standards. Great point, Logan. I think we talked about that through several episodes now, how important it is being intentional and being a good example. So that's another one where we talked about strong fathers, strong daughters heavily, how important that is, setting that example. So thanks for that comment, Logan.
Yeah, and thanks, Q, for your comment. 210. That's a gaming buddy of mine.
Okay,
He knows what's
nice.
up.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
And thanks to everyone in the chat for sticking in with us, and
And those
appreciate
who
you
tuned
being
in.
here. Yeah.
For sure.
This was personally really exciting for us to be able to interview Dr. Harley. Dustin, any other points about the book or things that you've studied from him? I know you're exhausted and it's getting late, so I don't want to hold you longer than you want to be here.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think the real key with it, he talks about it in the book a little bit, how it is valuable to read it by yourself, but it's something you really should do with your spouse. I mean, I think the insights that you get by doing it together are much more valuable. So this is, definitely a two-way street because it's individual to everyone, right? I mean, every single person who reads this book is going to get a completely different reaction from it, as to what their needs are, what their spouse's needs are. And a lot of times that changes. I think my needs have changed a lot in the past 10 years. I don't think I have the same, top 3 needs, let's say now, that I did, when I was in my 20s. And so, looking at it every couple of years and, kind of figuring out what your needs are, where they're being met, where they're not, I think it's a lot of fun for us. It's a chance to talk about, one of the things that we love the most, which is our relationship together, and having that, that excuse or that opportunity to go over that kind of stuff is super fun and valuable.
Yeah, and the fact he says that relationships, even when they hit rock bottom or you feel like you're at the end of your rope, he's like, that's the beauty of it, man. Like, just reignite it. It's just, he said it was just like a candle, like just light it back up. You just got to put some work into it, like you said, a garden. There's ups and downs and everything in life, and it's just nice to hear that someone who has counseled this many people have said he's seen people get divorced and get back together, and there's hope for any and every relationship. It's just taking the time to work on that relationship, and we forget that sometimes. We're human,
Yeah.
Yep. It's really easy to get caught up in our own, the blinders are on, so to speak.
Yeah, daily routines, things
and
like
you just, and people we're selfish sometimes. So yeah.
Absolutely.
I remember I wanted to hit on one thing that it was just so clear reading the chapter about sexual fulfillment is I feel we live in this world where you're not supposed to talk about that with your spouse, right? Like what does or doesn't make you happy when it comes to that aspect. And it's it's so stupid. The lie of oh, well, a real man should just know how to make her happy, or she should just know how to make you happy type of thing. It's well, not everyone's the same. So sit down, have a conversation. Hey, I don't like it when you do that. Don't do that again. Oh, okay. I didn't know. It's I don't know why, but I think at least for me too, I thought when we get married, we should just kind of have that all figured out and everything. And it should be this well-oiled machine, so to speak. It's well, not really. Cause just, so sit down, do yourself a favor if you haven't, sit down with your spouse, talk about the things that work for you and don't. And every couple's different. And I think that will go a long way too for a lot of people, is having that open conversation about it. Because in a lot of ways too, it builds intimacy on an emotional state, not physically, because you are being very candid about a very private thing. So, yeah.
And I think to touch on that too is we need to always have a reserve of grace for our wives and for ourselves on a daily basis. So like I always try to make sure I have a certain measure of grace when it comes to things, because we all mess up. We all say things that might anger each other. But I mean, if you give grace instead of anger, I mean, it's just going to be such a much better situation there. So
yeah. Great comment from Q.
Q. Mm-hmm.
Simple task that I need to improve in is checking in with my wife throughout the week. Ask her how her day was, how she's doing, give her the daily hug and kiss. Yeah, and that's something he really calls out in that chapter about affection. Is to guys, we like communicate to share information. Like I don't need Justin to text me and be like, "Hey man, I appreciate your friendship." Like I know we're friends. I don't need him to tell me all the time. But your
Give me
wife,
some whiskey, I might.
just yeah.
I love you, man.
But yeah, that's a great point with your wife. Just it's a little thing for you to do, but to her, it's received with such a huge impact, right? And because women think about it very differently than we do, and I think that's something he actually outlines in the book pretty well, is to just do it. Like just take a second, because what it says to your wife is I'm willing to set aside all these other things I need to be doing right now to just focus on you for just a few minutes and let you know that I was thinking about you. And it's such a simple thing, and I think it goes a long way. And that kind of thing too. Even try. This is something just to putting it out there before you have sex. Sit there together, in bed together, and talk about just things. And then, because for her, that it's building that connection and that intimacy. That if you haven't tried that, give that a shot. But great point. Q, thank you for that. And then Logan also had another good one. You can't expect what you don't inspect. Relates to being intentional with your relationship as well as with your spouse. So also a great one there. Thanks guys for the comments.
Yeah. Love the interaction, guys. Thanks.
Yeah. One thing I want to say about the getting home and giving her a kiss and a hug. I do that specifically with my wife every single day, and I do it before I greet my children, because I want my children to know that my wife is the priority before them. And it's not like in a menacing or a bad way. It's just, she comes before all else, and then the kids, and then everybody else in the world. That's the way God designed it and instructed it. And so like, obviously I'm going to always hug and kiss my children too when I get home. Right. But I'm very intentional. That's every single day. And one of the things, if a dad is facing a wife who's upset when they don't get that, is their dad might have done that for them growing up. Like my daughter, she's going to have that. And if a guy doesn't meet that need, she needs to express that. And so, I think that's a very good, very simple task that makes such a huge impact on a daily basis for sure.
And I've seen that instructed in numerous books too. So it's not like it's a one-off thing that you're doing. Yep. I've seen that validated by a lot of sources. So it's a good one.
Absolutely. All right, boys.
It's reaffirming that your relationship with your wife is strong and important. And so, kids want that foundation and that security blanket, and it subconsciously gives that to them. So it's not, initially it kind of sounds like, oh, you're stiff arming the kid, but no, it's actually, it actually builds safety for them.
I think if you're not routinely making your kids say, ooh, gross, because you're kissing your wife, you're making a mistake. That's a great, satisfying thing. Even at age 2 now, Lucas will see me kiss Kim, and it's hilarious. It starts so young, and it's so much fun because it sets a great precedent, and it models behavior for them. I think my son is going to understand how a man should treat his wife, from seeing it for years with us modeling that behavior, and that's huge.
Yeah, so I guess we can wrap it up so we can let Dustin get out of here. I'm sure
get some food and some sleep.
He needs some sleep and some cuddles. So the big bear needs his love. So the next episode is going to be something that my wife has been an absolute all-star, rock star. She's been the best, and she has had our son sleeping since week 5. She knows all the best gadgets, gizmos, all the good stuff. She knows schedules. She's read a bunch of books. So I want to go into a few of those books. And I'm sure you guys have heard of some of them, and we'll put the books out there on our Discord, because there's multiple books. But we definitely want to focus on a number of different things in the next podcast, like schedule and, adapting to new fatherhood, the fears that come with it, the anxiety, how you can be more helpful for your spouse, because there was things I missed. I'm sure that we all miss, especially in the hospital, things that your wife may need or items, just being prepared, because preparedness with a child is probably one of the best things you can have. So we're going to do that. And then also, if you're a first time viewer, please subscribe and smack that little bell on YouTube so you can get a notification when we go live. That would mean a whole lot. You guys, continuing to watch us, because without you guys' support, we're not going to get anywhere. So we're trying to help as many people as we can. So we want to mention our Facebook as well. We have a Facebook group, so you can talk about fatherhood, talk about the things that you need to talk about, or if you have issues you want to vent, or you want to talk to us privately, feel free to do that. Join that. So we have multiple avenues of social media, Twitter, Instagram. We've got it all. So we'll have those shameless plugs in the details on YouTube. But I'll let George take us out. And
go ahead, Brandon.
You guys.
You're on mute, brother.
He's muted.
Okay, sorry. But before we leave, I had 2 years of German in college, and all I have to say to Dustin is "Lege den Keks hin," which means put the cookie down in German.
Oh my God.
Nice.
Oh,
nice.
Wow.
It's the only time I've ever got to use German. So,
Dad joke.
I love it.
Dad joke.
I love it.
You didn't get the double knife hand. Dad joke.
Yeah, that's it.
So let's recap. Thank you, Dr. Harley, and thank you,
Absolutely.
Joyce, for helping us set this up.
Absolutely.
You were actually so awesome to work with getting set up. I hope we can have you both back, because I would be really excited to have you on with us. Thanks for the time and gracing us with your presence and having the conversations we had. Like Justin said, hit us up on all the social media. Please like the channel or subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with people that you think would benefit from this, so we can hopefully help some more people out there. And just thank you all, everyone who supports us, and appreciate it so much. And remember to check in on marriagebuilders.com. That is Dr. Harley's website. There is a ridiculous amount of resources there. It has all his books, audiobooks, the worksheets, the little things you can walk through with your wife for free, and kind of have those epiphanies of what does, what are areas in which you guys can do things together that are going to work better for you. And then thanks again, Greg, Lunar Branding, for the awesome gear. So I'm still waiting on my shirt and my hat. I'll definitely have those in the next podcast. But
You mean these?
we're gonna, yeah. I guess Justin lives close to the distribution center. He beat us to it. But yeah, you're looking slick, man. You're looking a lot better than us right now. So that's pretty much it. Next episode, advice for new dads. A whole lot of stuff. So Justin will anchor it, since he is the most recently new dad of us. But I think those of us who have been here a little bit longer still have some good advice on that arena. And just, we're super excited for everything that we're doing here, and hope that this has been beneficial. So take care, gentlemen. We're going to roll the outro. If I can find it. I'm a boomer. Here we go.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Present Fathers Podcast. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you can know when we go live next. Also be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and our Discord channel. It's our desire to grow this fathership together and support dads out there. If you think this channel would be beneficial to someone you know, please share it with them. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode.